3.1 billion approved 9 billion maluti, which is about 67.3% of GDP. Of this, recurrent expenditure amounts to 21.9 billion maluti, 47.4% of GDP, while capital spending rises to 9.03 billion maluti, 19.7% of GDP. This reflects a decisive shift towards infrastructure investment and accelerated execution. Over the medium term, revenue is projected to stabilize at 67.8% of GDP in 2027-28 and 69% in 2028-29, while expenditure declines to 67.7% from 67.7% while expenditure declines to 67.7%, resulting in fiscal surpluses of 2.9% and 7% of GDP, respectively. The external position has weakened due to declining textile and diamond exports, while the balance of payments remains supported by Lesotho Highlands Water Project Phase 2 capital inflows. The current account deficit is expected to widen in 2026 before improving as construction imports normalize. Foreign reserves are projected to remain adequate at around 6 months of import cover. Although sensitive to SACU volatility, the government of Lesotho's total debt stock as at end of January and for fiscal year 25-26, 2 billion maluti at the end of the fiscal year 24-25. This reflects a 3% reduction in our debt stock, with the debt to GDP ratio falling from 54.3% to 50% of GDP. The composition of public debt also shifted during the period, with the share of domestic or shares of domestic and external debt moving from 15.4% and 84.6% respectively to 16.9% and 83.1% respectively. The external debt portfolio remains mostly concessional at a share of 88.4% currently. This is despite the country graduating from international development assistance, low income to low middle income country status, which presented the country with the hardened higher costs of borrowing from the international financial markets. Our debt risk rating as a country remains unchanged from 2024-25 fiscal year at moderate level of debt distress with limited space to absorb shocks. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, this macroeconomic context leads to one clear conclusion. I wish I could make it easier, but the conclusion is that the reality that we are facing compels for us to adopt a deliberate shift in policy priorities towards strengthening domestic revenue mobilization. We have to be inward-looking. The financial markets out there are becoming much more stringent. So we have to look inwards towards strengthening domestic revenue mobilization, enforcing discipline and efficient expenditure in government, and restoring credibility in policy execution. For us, building economic resilience is no longer an option. It is now binding, and it is now the central organizing principle guiding government's policy priorities for 2026-27 financial year. Before I turn into policy priorities, allow me, Honorable President and Right Honorable Speaker, to highlight the risks and vulnerabilities posed by the current conditions. Honorable Speaker, Right Honorable Speaker, ke kopa ho bua ka Sesotho. Ke re ke maswabi hore ebe ditaba tsena tseo ke ntseng ke bua ka tsona di ba thata ho bueha ka puo ena ya rona, empa ke ne ke ratile hore ka re nka dingola ka Sesotho e le hore Mosotho e mong le mong a utlwe hore na re ntse re reng, empa di ba thata haholo ka nako e nngwe. Mme ke tla kopa o tlo nno dumelle hlomphehi hore kae ke nne ke tle ke leke ho kenya Sesotho. Maemo a re shebaneng le ona setjhaba sa heso ke maemo a boima haholo ao lefatshe kapo moruo wa lefatshe o fetohileng haholo. Re a lemoha hore lefatshe le nakong ya phetoho, nakong eo ho nang le dintwa, ho nang le ditsikitlano le ditsekisano. Re boetse re na le ditaba tsena tsa technology kapo marangrang, re boetse re na le ditaba tsa boemo ba lehodimo bo sa tsitsang. Ka lehlakoreng le leng ho a hlokomeleha hore dinaha tsa lefatshe ka moka di batla di tshebile kapo ke dinaha tse kgolo tseo e sa le re sebetsana le tsona ka baka la mathata ao banang le ona ba qetella ba itsheba hore na ditlhoko tsa bona ke difeng mme taba eo e etsa hore ho be thata ho rona hore jwale ebe tjhelete eo re nentse re e fumana matjhabeng e se e fumaneha ha bonolo ka hona ke nako ya hore re itlhatlhobe botjha mme boitlhatlhobeng bo ba rona botjha ho molemo hore re shebe ka hare ho rona hore na re ka tseba hore re sebedise mawala a feng le maano a feng hore re fumane mokgwa wa tswelepele ka borona ka tseo modimo a re fileng tsona re le naha re na le metsi re na le letsatsi re na le naha le tsohle tseo morena modimo a re fileng tsona ditaimane le batho
ya utlwala bona bas ya utlwala dotse ga bane e utlwaetse ka nnete a ke le mofeng sebaka
me mohlomphehi re lokela jwale ho kopanya maboko a rona hore re sebedise dihlodilong tseo re nang le tsona le tsohle tseo modimo a re fileng tsona hore re bone hore di sebeletsa naha ya habo rona re ntse re sebetsa hape le tsona dinaha tseo re nang le setswalle le tsona hore re se ke ra ba tshepe ya sisano ditaba tsena ha re ya ditabeng tsa dikgakanyo tsa ditjhelete tsa selemo sena seo re tlo kena ho sona re itukise hore tjhelete e ka fumanehang e sebediswe ka hloko haholo molemong wa ntshetsopele le ntlafatso ya setjhaba le naha ya rona mme re kenya maano tshebetsong a tla etsa hore ho be jwalo e le ka nnete hangata ha lefatshe ho na le ditaba tsa mofuta o tjena ho ba le hore dinaha tse nyenyane jwalo ka rona ke tsona tse utlwang bohloko ho feta tse kgolo mme re lokela ho lemoha taba eo mme re be re sebetse ka matla hore re le naha ya Lesotho meferefere ena e etsahalang ha e fela ka be ntse re eme re le naha e nang le boikemelo eo e ka tsebang hore e iphedise e fete mathata ana mme e benne e tswele pele taba eo e re tlama hore le se senyane seo re nang le sona ebe re tseba hore re boloke hobane ha re tsebe se tlang ka morao ha re tsebe tseo re tla kopana le tsona ka pele mme taba eo re tshwanetse hore re ne re etse jwalo re shebile hore setjhaba le sona se a phela haholo setjhaba se tlase mane se Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, the government remains committed to maintaining a sustainable fiscal path. Empa ke hlokomedise setjhaba sa heso hore le ha mmuso o na le boikemisetso bo jwalo, ntshetsopele ya naha ke mosebetsi wa setjhaba sohle. Ke mosebetsi o kopanelwang ke mmuso, ke ditsi tse ikemetseng, isitana le sona setjhaba. Mmuso wona o ikemiseditse, mme re ka lakatsa, mme ke a kgothaletsa hore setjhaba sa rona, sa bo rona, ditsi tse ikemetseng le bohle, re keneng ka mafolofolo hore re etse form partnerships morerong wa ntshetsopele ya naha ena. Ke ra tseba hore mmuso o sebetse o le mong, o tla sebetsa mmoho le baahi, setjhaba, isitana le ditsi tse ikemetseng le bohle. In this commitment, government requires the partnership of all stakeholders, local and international. Empa ke bontsha mohlomphehi hore in the context that I just highlighted, heavy reliance on SACU transfers, which we project will stabilize at around 20% of GDP, continue to pose a major macro-fiscal vulnerability and risk to our country, especially given South Africa's economic performance and regional and global trade dynamics. Ha kgwebo e sa tsamaye hantle lefatsheng ka bophara, lekeno lena le gore le fumanang ho tswa selekaneng sa SACU ho ba le papisitse le kgwebo, e ba qholotso ho rona. Mme ke ka hona ke reng re lokela hore jwale re bone mekgwa ya ho ikemela, re se ra itshetleha haholoholo ka lekeno lena hobane ha re na taolo ditabeng tse etsahalang lefatsheng tsa kgwebo le kgwebisano tse ka etsang hore lekeno lena le theohe. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, external trade shocks.
Ako ko behanyane fela. Ako ko behanyane. Ana bjale ho tlo etsahalang mo. Ke bolella hore a hona le bothata ntlo ena ha ena ho wela ne ke tswile haholo. O tla ke ntho ke na tsenyane fela. Tswela pele mohlomphehi letona.
Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, external trade shocks, including the new tariff regimes on our apparel exports, combined with global diamond market weaknesses, threaten domestic revenue and reserve buffers. A minor decline in regional trade growth could necessitate a mid-year fiscal adjustment for us. This is a major risk. Fiscal risks also arise from contingent liabilities associated with state-owned enterprises and public-private partnerships. Many state-owned enterprises continue to operate with significant levels of non-guaranteed debt, estimated at 1.4% of GDP. In addition, Some legacy PPP contracts contain termination clauses representing potential exposure of up to 3.8% of GDP. A comprehensive audit of these agreements is underway to avoid risks that could breach the proposed 60% of GDP, of 60% of GDP, debt to GDP ceiling under the fiscal rules framework. The very same trade barriers and protectionist policies in any form undermine investor confidence and long-term planning in vulnerable trade-dependent economies. And for us specifically, the impact exerts more pressure in the textile and apparel industry, historically our largest private sector employer and a cornerstone of our export base and foreign exchange earnings. What was once our comparative advantage, anchored by preferential access to one of the largest markets, has now become a structural vulnerability. International buyers are actively de-risking their supply chains, diverting orders away from smaller economies like ours. The result, again, is closures, layoffs, and large-scale unemployment, and increased pressure on household income. This erosion of our industrial base poses long-term risks not only to employment but also to skills retention, foreign exchange earnings, and other fundamental factors. Again, the conclusion is that Lesotho can no longer rely on episodic growth. We can no longer rely on preferential access or external financing to sustain jobs and public services. Resilience must now be built deliberately through stronger growth, domestic revenue mobilization, public financial management, or good public financial management, and institutions building. Capable of executing policy with speed and precision. The risk, which is the external financing environment that has tightened significantly. Global development assistance is being reprioritized as advanced economies face rising debt burdens, geopolitical tensions and associated threats, geographical or demographic shifts and pressures, and higher domestic spending needs. Of grant support recede and global development finance becomes more selective, our resilience increasingly depends on how effectively we can anchor growth within our immediate region. The regional economy is no longer a secondary consideration and option. It is now the primary buffer through which Lesotho can and must absorb external shocks, sustain trade, secure revenue, and protect livelihoods. It is against this backdrop, therefore, that regional developments, particularly within Southern African region, assume new or renewed strategic importance to us. The situation forces us to forge new strategic alliances as we strengthen existing partnerships. The bloated public sector wage bill estimated at approximately 17% of GDP remains amongst the highest in the region and globally, and is fiscally unsustainable. It crowds out spending on the most essential growth-inducing infrastructure such as roads and bridges, health infrastructure, schools, and productive infrastructure. This must be contained as a matter of urgency. Government cannot be the employer of choice or first choice. Neither can it be the employer of last resort. We must do everything to see that the private sector takes its rightful place and plays its role effectively in this country. And to the private sector, government cannot be your only client. Once again, I urge you to de-risk from government. You have to move into productive economic activities and sectors. There's no way around this one. It has to happen. Finally, the withdrawal of international health finance has created an estimated annual funding gap of 1.5 billion that we have to respond to. But I'm glad to also report that we are appreciative to the government and people of the United States of America for resuming our resumption of part of funding towards the control of HIV and AIDS and communicable diseases, including tuberculosis, through the U.S. Department of State. Then through this, an amount of $218 million will be disbursed over a period of 5 years starting from April 2026. This is an equivalent of 3.5 billion maluti. So the budget further introduces measures to internalize these costs through reprioritization, capitalizing on efficiency gains and sustainable financing mechanisms without compromising fiscal stability. In navigating a more uncertain global environment, government has identified 3 strategic opportunities to strengthen resilience and unlock sustainable growth. First, we will accelerate product and market diversification to reduce concentration risks and expand export and domestic value chains. Secondly, we will forge new partnerships while deepening existing ones to mobilize investment, technology, and access to markets. And thirdly, we will pursue the strategic optimization of all our natural resources, ensuring that they are managed prudently, leveraged for value addition, and translated into lasting economic and social returns for the nation. Honorable President, Honorable Speaker, Mohlomphei Motsamaisi wa dipuisano. This macroeconomic context leads to a clear, again, and unavoidable conclusion that we need a deliberate shift in policy, especially with priorities towards strengthening our domestic revenue, enforcing discipline and efficient expenditure, and restoring credibility in policy execution. Once again, economic resilience is very important. So it is no longer an option for us to build economic resilience. It is now central for us to build it. This fiscal stance allows government to fund national priorities while maintaining stability, despite the risks that I have just mentioned. As we do so, we must be aware and ready to mitigate implementation risks linked to ambitious capital programs that end up not being implemented. We must also be able to budget only for projects that are execution ready. And additionally, the projected increases in interest payments to both residents and non-residents demand careful monitoring. Lesotho's fiscal position, as I indicated earlier, has improved in recent years. Discipline in good times, not only adjustment in difficult times. Government's fiscal strategy is anchored on three objectives. Revenue during periods of economic stress. This approach will smooth expenditure, protect priority programs, and enhance fiscal credibility, including through the finalization of regulations to establish a stabilization fund. Reducing excessive dependence on SACU remains a #1 priority. We will intensify domestic revenue mobilization through strengthened tax administration, improved compliance, and modernized payment systems to reduce leakages from the system. The focus will be on broadening the tax base and improving efficiency rather than increasing the burden on compliant taxpayers or vulnerable households. To this end, the Tax Administration Bill amendments, Income Tax and VAT Administration Bill will be tabled in this year. Non-tax revenues will also receive renewed attention. Fees, charges, penalties, as well as resource-based revenues, will be managed with greater transparency and predictability to ensure fair and reliable returns from public assets. In this regard, government is actively engaging with South Africa on the review of the water royalty framework under the Lesotho Highlands Water Arrangement to better reflect the economic value of this strategic natural resource, evolving cost structures and long-term sustainability in a cooperative and mutually beneficial manner. The sustained decline in rough diamond prices has placed pressure on operating mines, employment and long-term investment, particularly in Lesotho's high-cost, deep-level operations. Mining, however, remains a strategic pillar of our economy. The government response is guided by a clear principle. Fiscal rigidity that accelerates mine closures ultimately destroys jobs, revenue, and national assets. So government is developing an overarching rules-based fiscal stabilization framework for the mining sector, prioritizing employment preservation, continuity of operation, and extension of mine life during periods of market distress. On the expenditure side, government's priority is not merely how much we spend, but how well we spend. While protecting essential services in health and education, government will strengthen efficiency, targeting and delivery of social protection programs to ensure that resources reach the most vulnerable households. At the same time, firm control will be exercised over rigid recurrent expenditures, particularly the wage bill, to preserve space for operations, for maintenance, and high-quality capital investment. We continue on our journey to increase capital investments driven by project readiness and execution capacity, with priority given to projects that are fully prepared technically, financially, and institutionally, so that public investments translate into completed infrastructure and assets, as well as tangible economic returns. Borrowing will remain prudent and strategic. Government will prioritize concessional financing for high-impact projects, carefully manage fiscal risks and contingent liabilities, and strengthen oversight of public enterprises. Within this framework, government has created the policy and institutional space for the engineering and potential issuance of diversified financing instruments, including a diaspora bond, longer-dated infrastructure bonds for 7 years and beyond, and the groundwork for a green bond framework to support renewable energy and climate-aligned investments. This fiscal strategy reflects a decisive shift from short-term pressures to long-term resilience, from reliance on volatile revenues to domestic effort, and from budget expansion to disciplined execution. To this end, government will operate a rules-based fiscal framework anchored on the following quantitative parameters. First, the debt ceiling of 60% of GDP as a hard ceiling. A debt anchor of 50% of GDP, which is a medium-term target. And an external debt limit of 40% of GDP, and a structural deficit target of no more than 3% of GDP, adjusted for SACU volatility, supported by operational expenditure guardrails. Mr. Speaker, coming now closer to the estimates, government's short-term and medium-term policy framework remains firmly anchored in the Extended National Strategic Development Plan 2, which provides a critical planning tool with the horizon going up to 2027-28, within which government will consolidate ongoing reforms, complete priority interventions, and safeguard development momentum following successive global and domestic shocks. This framework continues to guide national priorities and public investment decisions, as well as the allocation of scarce fiscal resources in a disciplined and strategic manner. In that light, inclusive, broad-based, sustainable, and employment-creating economic growth remains the primary and central objective of government. While macroeconomic stability may not be sufficient, it is certainly a necessary condition for growth. We have to turn our fiscal fortunes into sustained, long-term growth. As such, government will continue to implement reforms that guard and maintain stability while expanding productive capacity and accelerating private sector-led growth across agriculture, manufacturing, mining, tourism, services, and other growth-driving sectors. We will continue to strengthen the business environment through targeted regulatory reforms, improved investment facilitation, and enhanced access to finance, particularly for micro, small, and medium enterprises, while promoting export diversification, value addition, and high-impact infrastructure investment. In our pursuit for this goal of growth and jobs, government's policy direction is to prioritize infrastructure that enables productivity, that enables trade, private sector participation and job creation. This includes investments in roads and connectivity networks, investments in bridges, investments in aviation infrastructure, investments in renewable energy generation and transmission, investments in water sector, including irrigation schemes, border management facilities, as well as education and health. These investments will unlock domestic and international trade, strengthen tourism, enhance energy security, improve agricultural productivity, and expand the productive sector of our human capital. A coordinated approach supported by improved project preparation and accelerated implementation is essential to maximize economic returns, to ground in private investment, and ensure that infrastructure spending translates into tangible growth. As government builds this new infrastructure, we are equally mindful of the growing threat posed by climate-related disasters to existing assets. Floods, droughts, and extreme weather events are increasingly damaging public infrastructure and posing recurrent fiscal costs. So accordingly, this budget prioritizes not only infrastructure, but also reinforcement, rehabilitation, and climate proofing of vulnerable and aging infrastructure, ensuring durability, resilience, and value for money over the asset life cycle. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, our economy has long been government-led and heavy and dependent on external revenues. A central policy goal is therefore to rebalance towards private investment and exports. This will entail the following: promoting private sector-led growth and export-oriented industries to create jobs and reduce poverty, to improve the business climate, simplifying regulations, creating a competitive environment, and unlocking access to finance. And thirdly, diversification beyond the apparel, diamonds, and water exports. And lastly, building resilience to external shocks. The second pillar is fiscal consolidation and revenue mobilization. So, fiscal discipline and effective revenue mobilization remain the cornerstone of stability. Sustainable growth cannot be achieved without stability, and stability cannot be secured if the fiscal framework remains vulnerable to external shocks and structural weaknesses. Government will therefore remain firmly committed to ensuring fiscal discipline across the public sector. So in this vein, a strengthened control environment is a must, and it will ensure that every lootie that is spent delivers measurable economic and social returns for the benefit of Lesotho. Accountability systems will continue to be reinforced to minimize waste, theft, inefficiency, and leakages, all forms of leakages. Government will protect and progressively expand capital spending while insisting on timely execution so that public investment delivers growth, delivers assets, and development dividends. At the same time, recurrent spending will be rationalized and confined to enabling the effective functioning of public institutions without inefficiencies. In addition, to limit our vulnerability in the face of an uncertain global economic environment, we will continue to first build frameworks that enable us to save and invest the windfall revenues wisely. And by this, the creation of a stabilization fund will continue. Secondly, we will improve public financial management and procurement. And in this one, institute e-procurement to limit the resource hemorrhage that we are currently suffering from procurement practices. And thirdly, promote fiscal discipline and better spending. And lastly, to target spending towards high return infrastructure that creates value and spin-offs. With regard to revenue mobilization, we seek to maximize domestic revenue collection while remaining cognizant of prevailing global and domestic vulnerabilities. Revenues that are raised will be directed primarily towards service delivery and productive capital investment, ensuring that compliant taxpayers see tangible benefits from their contributions and therefore get encouraged. Efforts to simplify compliance and reduce administrative burdens will continue, supported by investments in digital tax systems, including the expansion of electronic filing and payment platforms, particularly for VAT. Systems to improve the collection of non-tax revenue, including fees, charges, and penalties, will be strengthened through the rollout of cashless payment solutions and enhanced accountability mechanisms. In parallel, government will review selected fees, charges, and penalties to ensure reliance on cash at pay points, lowering administrative costs, and minimizing risks associated with holding cash and handling it. It will also improve convenience for citizens by simplifying and standardizing how government services are paid for. In this vein, I'm pleased to report that the development phase has been successfully completed, and the system is now in the final stages of testing, with a public launch planned for early April. This reform forms part of a broader effort to modernize public financial management and transform Lesotho's payment landscape for the benefits of all Basotho. So government will continue to nurture strategic partnerships with development partners, bilateral and multilateral institutions, and the broader international community to mobilize concessional financing, technical assistance, and investment in support of this important national priority. Coming to strengthening productive sectors, it is the resolve of government to harness our natural resources, human capital, skills, innovation, and creativity to unlock Lesotho's comparative advantages and strengthen productive capacity and trade competitiveness. The agricultural sector remains pivotal, yet significantly underexploited, limiting progress towards food security, import substitution, and rural employment. Government views agriculture as a catalyst for industrialization through agro-processing value chains that can generate decent jobs and export earnings. Accordingly, this budget prioritizes investments in skills, in research, and institutional capacity aimed at unlocking the full potential of this strategic sector. Through the strategic utilization of our water resources, government will roll out transformative investments in irrigation infrastructure. Increased output, agricultural output will be processed domestically to support import substitution and export diversification, strengthening foreign exchange earnings while deepening value chains within the economy and creating jobs. Lesotho welcomes the one-year extension of AGOA, which provides a pivotal and which provides a critical, though time-bound opportunity to stabilize exports, protect jobs, and reposition the manufacturing sector. This extension is being treated not as a pause in reform, but as a bridge for decisive action. During this period, government is working with industry and financial institutions to support firm-level restructuring, productivity improvements, and market diversification, while accelerating regional trade integration and reducing over-reliance on a single preferential regime. Instruments such as the Inclusive Growth Facility are being deployed now to provide targeted working capital and machinery finance, enabling exporters to meet orders, retain employment, and improve competitiveness. Our objective is clear: to emerge from this transition with a more resilient, diversified, and competitive productive base. And in this regard, Our policies aim to diversify exports and reduce reliance on a single or few markets, to strengthen regional trade and leverage the African Continental Free Trade Agreement while exploring new markets, bilateral or multilateral, as well as opportunities for cooperation for mutual benefit and gain. We also aim to support productive business activities in key sectors such as manufacturing, energy production, agriculture, tourism, and services. Turning now to digital transformation, we live in a digital era, and Lesotho cannot afford to fall behind. Digital transformation is urgent and indispensable for accelerating growth, inclusive and effective participation in the global economy. So government will make sizable investments to accelerate digitization and enable our population to have access to digital infrastructure. Targeted actions will be implemented to expand ICT access and connectivity, improve reliability, and bridge the digital divide. Infrastructure will be extended to underserved areas. Connectivity in public institutions will be upgraded and installed, and partnerships with satellite service providers will be deepened to reach communities beyond the limits of terrestrial networks. Affordable public internet access points will be rolled out to enable broader participation, particularly among young people in the digital economy. Within government itself, digital systems will be modernized, cybersecurity strengthened, and electronic platforms expanded to improve service delivery, transparency, and information sharing. Investments in digital skills for public servants will ensure that systems are secure, accessible, and responsive to the needs of citizens. Through these measures, government is broadening digital reach, reducing connectivity gaps, and enabling Basotho to participate fully in a modern, knowledge-based economy. And for this, we aim to enhance access to digital infrastructure and service. We aim to improve service delivery across government and private sector, reduce the time and cost of transacting, and enhance creativity, innovation, and inclusion. And coming to human capital development, sustained investments in human capital remain fundamental to long-term development. Government will continue to improve education and skills development, expand technical and vocational training, and support entrepreneurship to equip Basotho with skills aligned to labor market needs. The health system will be strengthened to improve efficiency, quality, and access, including a review of tertiary healthcare delivery. Social protection systems will be modernized to better target and support vulnerable households, ensuring that growth is inclusive and that no Mosotho is left behind as the economy transforms. In parallel, government is placing renewed emphasis on nutrition as a foundational pillar for human capital development. Preventing stunting, malnutrition, and diet-related health conditions is essential to build healthy bodies, sharp minds, and a productive workforce. So this budget therefore prioritizes early life and community-based nutrition interventions, recognizing that investments in nutrition yield some of the highest long-term social and economic returns. We will scale up preventive nutrition programs, including maternal and child nutrition initiatives, school-based feeding, and community-level delivery mechanisms such as nutrition clubs, diets, local food production, and nutrition education, particularly in rural and climate-vulnerable communities. By strengthening nutrition outcomes across the life cycle, government is investing not only in better health, but in improved learning outcomes, higher productivity, and a more resilient future for our people. And policy priorities in this area include improving educational outcomes and workforce skills, maintaining social protection and economic inclusion, reducing urban-rural inequality, and supporting vulnerable groups, and human capital development, enhancement, and inclusion. I turn now to governance and institutional strengthening. Other focal areas include access to justice, crime prevention, and the effective delivery of public services. Effective parliamentary oversight. And in particular, preventive oversight requires the right interface between the legislature and the executive through creating an ecosystem that there is room to enhance rules within which public scrutiny happens to ensure efficiency and effectiveness. Furthermore, for Lesotho to position herself as a viable investment destination, strong corporate governance norms and practices are vital to secure long-term capital investment. Therefore, governance instruments such as shareholder agreements should receive special attention and be reviewed where necessary to secure the interests of the government and the people. Leadership and quality technical training for different cadres will be our focus to improve policy development and service delivery. Complementing these reforms, targeted leadership and development technical training across all cadres, especially key cadres, will be prioritized to strengthen policy formulation, institutional performance, and service delivery across the public sector. Furthermore, as Lesotho positions herself as a credible and competitive investment, strong corporate governance standards will remain essential for mobilizing long-term capital. Government will review and strengthen governance instruments, including those that have been in existence for a very long time. Mr. Speaker, public financial management, even across these oversight bodies, will remain critical. Priority will be given to strengthening fiscal discipline, to improving budget credibility, and ensuring that public resources are managed transparently, efficiently, and sustainably. We will continue to modernize Treasury operations through improved cash management, strengthened commitment controls, and enhanced expenditure oversight to prevent the accumulation of arrears and other commitments. These reforms will be supported by ongoing upgrading of financial management systems, strengthened internal audit and accountability mechanisms, and a renewed focus on linking budgets to results. Together, these measures will safeguard public finances, protect service delivery, and reinforce confidence in the stewardship of Together, these measures will these measures will safeguard public finances, protect service delivery, and reinforce confidence in the stewardship of national resources. Honorable Speaker, this lays the foundation now for me to go into, right, Honorable Speaker, to go into,
all members, can you take your Kobeanya? Nobody. You will aside the post. Miki bona hore jwale ka nqena o ntsa hlahlellwa ka dikwantsanyane jwale ke hle ke batla ho mo fa sebaka sa hore a tla re nepe hantle a ska ba qobokela a etse ntho e nepaetseng re utlwe hantle hore na o hlile o reng tokomane ena ke tokomane e bohlokwa haholo mme re ke ra ba re se re tswela pele fela rigidly re ntse bona hore kae e ska tloha dintho tsa dutla. Honourable Minister, you have reorganized yourself. May you are able to proceed.
Okay. Thank you. Right, Honourable Speaker. I now beg your indulgence that I move now into sector allocations. Billion Malut is allocated to the economic growth and job creation sector to stimulate private sector activity, boost productivity, and expand employment opportunities. In trade and investment, an allocation of 437.4 million has been directed to trade and investment to strengthen economic competitiveness, expand market access, and support enterprise development across priority sectors. Resources will support market diversification across various partners, the EU, the UK, USA, European Free Trade Association, African Continental Free Trade Areas, Southern African Customs Union, and Southern African Development Community, SADC, to say economic diversification and investment climate strengthening, aimed at improving efficiency, reducing business costs, and expanding productivity. Under trade facilitation, funding will support the operationalization of the national single window for trade, integrating 10 ministries into a unified digital platform to make it easier for the private sector to register and to receive services without extended periods of time. Border modernization investments at Maseru Bridge, at Fiscal and Kachasnek will improve logistics efficiency and regional competitiveness. Free business registration and the digital licensing system will lower entry barriers for entrepreneurs. For economic diversification, allocations will support industrial development in Maseru and Leribe, the Maseru Apparel and Textile Hub, and the establishment of 3 new industrial hubs for cosmetics, essential oils, and spices. Investments in horticulture and poultry, valued at 2.5 billion maluti, will be facilitated to strengthen food security and domestic production. Entrepreneurship support will continue through BEDCO, the Competitiveness and Financial Inclusion Facility, CAFI, and the Lesotho Enterprise Assistance Program, LEAP. To expand trade in services, funding will support implementation of the SADC Protocol on Trade in Services, including skills preparation for Basotho professionals in IT, education, finance, and health. To strengthen the investment climate, allocations will support finalization of the Special Economic Zones Bill, completion of sector strategies for textiles, apparel, and automotive manufacturing, and continued construction of the standards and quality infrastructure building. Development finance instruments, including partial credit guarantees, supply chain finance, quasi-equity instruments, the Inclusive Growth Fund facility, and the Cooperative Development Fund will support Basotho-owned enterprises and community-based economic activity. Coming to agriculture, an allocation of 1.1 billion maluti has been earmarked for agriculture to strengthen food security, raise productivity, and support sustainable farming systems. Expenditure in 2026-27 will prioritize food production, irrigation systems development, livestock protection, and strengthening of key agricultural value chains. To improve crop production, government will support sharecropping blocks through subsidized agricultural machinery and to expand cultivated land and improve efficiency. The Maseru storage and logistics facility will be fully operationalized to strengthen national grain reserves and post-harvest management. To support climate-resilient agriculture, government will establish irrigation schemes at a minimum of 8 sites to stabilize production, reduce dependence on rainfall or rain-fed agriculture, and enable year-round farming across priority crop zones. To safeguard livestock, allocations will finance a free national vaccination programs targeting sheep scab and anthrax, strengthened border biosecurity controls, and preparatory works towards establishment of a national animal diagnostic laboratory. In the wool and mohair subsector, funding will support continuation of the merino breeding program and upgrading of the Kuting artificial insemination facility, including installation of a liquid nitrogen plant to improve fiber quality, productivity, and rural incomes. In tourism, facilities in Hakome and Smonko. Rollout of a national tourism brand campaign, engagement of tourism ambassadors, and enhanced digital marketing alongside resources for the finalization and enactment of the Tourism Act to modernize the sector's regulatory framework. To support growth in tourism, culture, and sports, government has prioritized high-impact investments within the sector. 150 million has been allocated for sports infrastructure to upgrade key facilities and expand access to quality sports amenities nationwide. In addition, 55 million maliti has been provided for tourism promotion, cultural development, marketing, and tourism asset development, aimed at strengthening destination visibility, preserving heritage, and enhancing the quality and competitiveness of Lesotho's tourism offering. Moving now to the human capital development. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, the human capital development sector receives 8.1 billion maluti to strengthen education, health, skills development, and social welfare programs, ensuring a capable, healthy, and socially supported population. In education, an allocation of 3.5 billion maluti has been provided to improve learning outcomes, expand access, and advance critical sector reforms. Government will prioritize curriculum reform, strengthening technical and vocational education, and expanding early learning and basic education, supported by investments in infrastructure for classrooms, laboratories, workshops, modern equipment, and teacher training for the new three-tier curriculum. Resources are also allocated to improve governance and quality assurance through strengthened school management, faster infrastructure delivery, expanded digital learning, improved learning materials, and modernized education data systems to ensure a more equitable, resilient, and labor market responsive education system. We plan to roll out services such as access to water, access to electricity, access to connectivity, and health services at all schools. An allocation, I move on now to health services. An allocation of 3.1 billion has been provided to the health sector to strengthen service delivery, improve healthcare infrastructure, and enhance population well-being. In 2026-27, government will intensify reforms anchored on primary health care, focusing on stronger community-based services, focusing on prevention, and a more responsive health system, including improved maternal and child health, expanded immunization and community health services, elimination of mother-to-child transmission of HIV, and strengthened environmental health covering water, sanitation, food safety, and climate health actions. Resources will also modernize the national referral system, strengthen prevention and management of communicable diseases, advance establishment of the Lesotho Medical School through accreditation, infrastructure, and equipment, and reinforce disease surveillance and emergency preparedness, supported by improved health data systems and operationalization of the Public Health Emergency Operations Center. In infrastructure development priorities, an allocation of 6.5 billion has been directed toward infrastructure development priorities to accelerate national development, modernize critical public assets, and support economic growth through improved connectivity, service delivery, and resilience. An allocation of 386 million Maluti has been provided to the ICT sector to advance digital transformation and expand access to modern technological services. Funding will prioritize expansion of connectivity to underserved areas, upgrading IT infrastructure in public institutions such as schools, such as community halls, such as local government offices, as well as healthcare centers. Partnerships with satellite service providers to reach remote communities and rollout of affordable public internet access points, as well as modernization of government digital systems, including strengthened cybersecurity management, expanded e-platforms, and digital skills development for public servants. Coming to energy, an allocation of 1.7 billion has been designated for the energy sector to strengthen energy security, expand access, and support sustainable power generation, renewable power generation. In 2026-27, government will intensify investment in renewable energy and sustainable infrastructure, guided by the National Energy Compact, to accelerate universal access to affordable and energy. Thanks to the World Bank Group, Lesotho is now a member of a program and a compact that aims to by the World Bank Group and the African Development Bank. Resources will, amongst other initiatives, support expansion of generation capacity through additional solar and hydropower projects, upgrading of substations, grid expansion and modernization, deployment of mini-grids and solar home systems, upgrading of rural networks, and electrification to support industrial and economic development, while mobilizing private sector participation and strengthening financing mechanism. Complementing these investments, multi-year programs including Renewable Lesotho will continue expanding green mini-grids, solar-powered water solutions, improved cook stoves, and off-grid electrification through 2028, reinforcing energy security, energy resilience, and supporting climate resilience and inclusive growth. In the water sector has been allocated $2.4 billion Maluti to enhance water security and improve supply systems, as well as strengthening water resource management. Funding will support expansion of integrated catchment management under Renoga project, supported by European Union, construction of 17 new rural water systems across all districts, maintenance of village water schemes and systems, and implementation of climate resilient water and sanitation investments. Under the Lesotho Lowlands Water Development Project, Phase 2 and Phase 3, allocations will support completion and expansion of water distribution networks, transmission pipelines, reservoirs, pumping stations, and construction of 1,027 sanitation facilities, increasing national water and sanitation coverage. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, under roads and buildings, a total of 2.1 billion has been allocated to roads and buildings to strengthen national connectivity and upgrade critical infrastructure. Funding will support construction and rehabilitation of asphalt and gravel roads across districts. Commencement of strategic projects, including the Katse-Tabatseka Road and the Tebelong Vehicular Bridge, initiation of new road works, feasibility studies, rehabilitation of priority corridors, and procurement for railway rehabilitations. It is worth mentioning, Honorable Speaker, that with regard to unpaved roads, the plan is that unpaved roads will be upgraded in almost all constituencies with the use of available labor in those constituencies and areas where roads will be done. Honorable Speaker, ditsela tse tla etswa tse unpaved ke tse seng tsa letshwana di tla etswa go sebediswa matsoho a setjhaba se sebetsang kapo se teng dibakeng tseo e le hore setjhaba seo se tsebe ho fumana mesebetsi ba iketsetse ditsela tse jwang. Ka Sesotho re di bitsa difatofato. Mohlomphehi, we have an allocation in this regard of about 10 million per constituency for this work. Allocations will also support completion of bus terminals, community council offices, police stations, aviation infrastructure upgrades at Moshosho 1 International Airport, and 3 more local airstrips, waste management facilities, fire control services infrastructure, maintenance of government buildings and housing, and implementation of community-based climate resilience projects under the local climate adaptive living facility. It is not just completion of those that are currently going on, it is commencement of new terminals, bus terminals in 3 districts, commencement of community council offices and police stations in other several areas. Mohlomphehi, Mokamedi wa ntlo ya Senate, Mohlomphehi motsamaisi wa dipuisano ka ntlong ya bokgethwa, ke tswele pele ho ya mokgahlelong o mong, governance and institutional strengthening. In governance and institutional strengthening, an allocation of 9.7 billion has been designated to enhance public sector efficiency, reinforce accountability systems, and support institutional reforms. Coming to the sub-sector of advancing security, good governance, and economic diplomacy, economic transformation cannot be sustained without security, good governance, and national resilience. Investment, enterprise, and service delivery depend on a stable environment. It depends on trusted institutions and the capability of those institutions, including the capacity to manage risks, whether fiscal, climate, or security related. The measures I now outline are therefore integral to safeguarding the economic gains envisaged in this budget. As part of the commitment to governance and institutional strengthening, government will undertake a comprehensive review of allowances for chiefs to ensure that their remuneration is aligned with their expanding responsibilities in community leadership and local administration. Ka Sesotho, Ditsiane tsa marena.
Ako go banya. Ke ne ke thibel tla le khabanela le ka ofising ya Tonakgolo. O bona ka le yena o batla to partake in the presentation. Yena ke mothi. O ga o mo fela mo right am sebetsi ka je. Re tla ne re tle re tlo kela le go. Tsala pele wa minister.
Ke a leboha mohlomphehi ka nnete ke nna mokgathaditseng ke se ke kopa tshwarelo ne ke batla technical assistance ke ne ke sa tsebe gona ke tla ga allowance se keng o nthusitse ke kopa ho e hlalosa ka Sesotho hore ditsiane tsa marena di tla ntlafatswa selemong sena. Ka tlhokomelo ya hore mosebetsi wa bona wa borena o batla o pharaletse haholo ruri. Bahlomphehi, strengthening traditional leadership remains a key pillar in enhancing governance, effectiveness, and social cohesion. Ha se taba e re ka iphapanyetsang yona eno. In the security sector, government will also prioritize the intake of new recruits into the Lesotho Mounted Police Service to bolster law enforcement capacity, improve public safety, and ensure adequate staffing to meet emergency security demands across the country. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, the military has increased deployment across high crime areas such as Mokota-Koti, Mokotlong, Matsieng, Peka, Fobane, Khubedu, Matedile, Berea, and Rote. This heightened presence has improved public safety significantly. It has reassured, or it is reassuring communities, and it has contributed to a reduction in violent incidences of violent crimes. With enhanced training, upgraded infrastructure, and strengthened personnel development, security challenges will continue to be mitigated. To promote stability and curb the scourge of corruption and corrupt practices, government will reinforce national early warning and intelligence systems and intensify efforts to prevent terrorism in all its forms and related activities. Cyber attacks persistently threaten people, strengthen national cybersecurity by protecting public systems, financial platforms, and critical economic infrastructure against cyber attacks, fraud, and data breaches. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, we will strengthen our resilience and assert our economic sovereignty against these threats. Government is pursuing a more vigorous approach to economic diplomacy, transforming foreign policy into a strategic instrument for national economic security. Our missions abroad and our presence there will become frontline agents for investment promotion, for trade facilitation, and for building new strategic partnerships. Honorable Speaker, Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, to protect financial sector integrity and comply with standards, Lesotho will embark on a national risk assessment to identify, assess, and understand specific money laundering and terrorism financing risks. gaps in systems, including those in the registration and monitoring operations of legal persons, virtual assets, and corruption will also be identified. A risk-based approach will be used to develop and implement a program of action to address areas where vulnerabilities are highest, to prevent laundering of money and prioritize resource allocation accordingly. Statistics and planning systems. Strengthening of national statistics systems for planning remain paramount for evidence-based planning and policy making. The population census will be undertaken in April-May this year and will provide valuable information about our population to assess the quality of life, the changes that affect our population, and inform policy making on what needs to be improved and priorities so that we sharpen our policy making and targets. It also comes at an opportune time when the performance review of the NSDP is due and the National Vision 2066 is under development. A think tank will be put together by end of April to undertake analytical work and possible scenarios that can set Lesotho on a higher economic growth trajectory and position Lesotho on a sustainable long-term development path, as we also exploit the industrial revolution as well as beneficial integration into global markets. On anti-corruption and institutional reforms, the Directorate for Corruption and Economic Offenses will strengthen anti-corruption and institutional reform measures in the upcoming financial year with an allocation of 70.8 million. This will include expanding public awareness programs, conducting corruption risk assessments and integrity audits, and enhancing investigative and prosecutorial capacity. The Directorate will enforce asset declaration requirements and lifestyle audits to promote transparency and accountability. A national corruption typology study will be undertaken to inform targeted interventions and guide policy reform. In addition, technological systems will be upgraded to improve operational efficiency and reduce vulnerabilities to cyber-related threats. On cross-cutting issues, I would like to talk about youth development and empowerment. Youth development and empowerment has been allocated 124.3 million. When this government declared youth unemployment a national disaster in mid-2025, it was not merely a symbolic gesture. It was a recognition that we cannot build a stable future whilst our most energetic, our youth, or our most energetic asset, which is our youth, remains on the sidelines. Government continued to intensify its strategic partnerships with all stakeholders to join forces to address the unemployment crisis. In collaboration with our development partners, we rolled out the Power Hub initiative that seeks to establish dedicated youth innovation centers in every district, starting with Berea and Kuching in 2026-27. These hubs will provide market-aligned training in digital coding, agro-processing, and high-end textiles linked to the ITC Ethical Fashion Initiative. On the other hand, the National Volunteer Corps, NVC, has been scaled as a front line for bridging the no job without experience gap. For 2026-27, we are increasing the budget for the NVC to allow for an additional 2,500 placements for unemployed graduates. This initiative also has a host partner incentive where the government subsidizes 50% of the stipend for any private firm that hosts an NVC volunteer for a minimum of 12 months with a pathway for permanent employment. To ensure immediate relief, the Youth Apprenticeship Program and the Public Works Program that I spoke about are being revived and scaled. A mandate has been issued that at least 40% of the labor force on all government-funded infrastructure projects, including the LHWP2 secondary roads, must be recruited from the local youth population. These participants will not just earn a wage, but will receive trade certifications that enable them to compete for future regional construction projects. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, this financial investment is only half of the equation. To truly address this malady of youth unemployment, we must move from ad hoc programs to permanent, legally binding institutional framework. I'm pleased to announce that for the 2026-27 fiscal year, the government has prioritized the finalization and enactment of the National Youth Development Bill. And this act, once it becomes an act, will legally establish the National Youth Council as the supreme coordinating body for all youth-led organizations and initiatives within the country. The Council will not only advocate for youth interests, but will serve as a regulatory body to ensure that youth-focused programs, including the NVC and CAFI, are meeting their performance targets. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, the era of nothing for the youth without the youth starts now. Once enacted, the bill will mandate, among others, the inclusion of youth representatives on boards of public institutions and agencies without compromising the requisite competencies, so that youth-centric issues are dealt with within institutions as well. We indeed have moved from declaring a disaster to delivering a solution. To our youth, this budget is your invitation to the workshop of national development. The tools are now in your hands, and we need a conversation. The Inclusive Growth Facility is already demonstrating its ability to translate policy intent into tangible economic impact within a single fiscal year. Through our partnership with First National Bank Lesotho, government has institutionalized 100 million maluti guarantee on lending structure under the Inclusive Growth Facility, enabling that bank to deploy its own balance sheet in support of priority productive sectors, particularly textiles and apparel, while prudently managing risks. On the strength of this structure, tailored financial products were developed and taken to market within the same financial year. And as a result, an active financing pipeline now exceeds 200 million maluti. In assessed demand, spanning from working capital, machinery acquisition, logistics expansion, and factory upgrades. This pipeline is already under credit assessment and early deployment, and has the potential to stabilize existing employment and unlock job creation opportunities as production scales. Honorable President, alongside this, Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, alongside this initiative, government also allocated through the Inclusive Growth Facility 300 million maluti to the Lesotho Post Bank as a disbursement intermediary, focused predominantly on small and emerging enterprises across a broader range of productive sectors, where a strong pipeline of SME financing is already under consideration. Over the medium term expenditure framework, government will scale this model by extending the Inclusive Growth Facility risk-sharing arrangements to additional commercial banks and development finance institutions, broadening sectoral coverage and deepening access to finance while crowding in private capital in support of inclusive growth. I now move to climate resilience and sustainability. Climate adaptation and green development remain central to strengthening national resilience and ensuring sustainable development across all sectors. Last year, Lesotho hosted the 2025 International Wool and Textile Organization Wool Roundtable, reaffirming our commitment to sustainable rangeland management. Through this work, 2,892 hectares were restored to support rural livelihoods. Despite ongoing climate-driven land degradation, we rehabilitated 60,000 hectares and continue expanding forest cover through the revived Green Recovery Initiative. To reduce urban pollution, government introduced the plastic levy in December 2024. Revenue from this levy will, amongst other interventions, finance the construction of buyback centers in Maseru and Maputo, and later on in other districts as well, to promote recycling, to create income opportunities, and support a cleaner and greener Lesotho. I move now to disaster risk financing. Honorable President, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Right, Honorable Speaker. In 2026-27, the government will strengthen disaster risk management by accelerating the implementation of the disaster risk reduction policy and completing the National Resilience Strategic Framework to guide coordinated resilience actions across all sectors. Disaster risk management working groups will be revived at all levels to improve coordination and preparedness. The National Early Warning Strategy will be updated to strengthen hazard forecasting and community alert systems, alongside the undertaking of comprehensive hazard mapping and vulnerability assessments to inform safer development planning and improve support to households at risk. In parallel, financial preparedness will be reinforced through continued participation in the Africa Risk Capacity Mechanism. In conclusion, Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, this budget is grounded in a simple but profound conviction. The future prosperity of our nation depends on our ability to transform our economic structure and fortunes and unlock the productive potential of our people. From the global shocks we face, through the fiscal choices we make, to the reforms we implement, and the investments we prioritize, this budget has followed a single, simple logic. Resilience built through discipline. Inclusion driven by opportunity, and growth enabled by digital as well as institutional transformation and human capital development. These are not slogans. They are the principles that guide the 2026-27 budget estimates, and that guide the pathways to a stronger, more self-reliant and sustainable Lesotho. We have chosen a path that prioritizes resilience over vulnerability, productivity over dependence, and opportunity over stagnation. We have chosen to place enterprise at the center of growth, to invest in infrastructure that expands possibilities, and to strengthen institutions that support long-term development. Ho aha metheho ya ntlafatso ya moshwelella. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, let me reaffirm with absolute clarity the central message of this budget. This is not a budget of hesitation. It is a budget that requires action. It is a budget of action. It is built to stabilize our economy, to reform our institutions, and unlock inclusive growth for every Lesotho. It is a call to strengthen national resilience, modernize our systems, and confront our challenges with the courage and confidence they demand. The journey ahead will not be without difficulty, not by any means. Structural transformation requires discipline. It requires persistence. it requires for us to work as a collective. It demands that we manage our public finances responsibly. It demands that we implement reforms consistently and maintain the confidence of citizens and investors alike. This is the moment for Lesotho to choose boldness over comfort, discipline over complacency, and progress over stagnation. Elder by 50 maluti to 1,000 maluti this year. Ka ha beng ba taba tsena ke dumela go batla ho di utlwa. Ke kopa ke bue ka Sesotho ba hlomphehi ba ka ke re maqheku a rona bonkgono le bantatemoholo ba tla ekeletswa ditsiane tsa bona ka 50 maluti hore ba fumane sekete ka kgwedi. But humility must walk hand in hand with determination. The decisions we take today in this House must reflect the urgency of the moment and the aspirations of the Basotho people who trust us and who have entrusted us with their lives, and by so doing, with their future and the future of their offspring. I take this opportunity, Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, members, to extend my sincere gratitude to the Right Honorable the Prime Minister, to yourselves for and its agencies, your discipline, your analytical rigor, and the sacrifices you make daily and that you have made for us to be able to deliver this budget will not go unnoticed. And looking forward, I look for your steadfastness and the same discipline and rigor in aiding government and all its agencies to implement it. My appreciation also extends to our development partners, to our civil society, the private sector, the traditional leaders, to every Mosotho who contributed to the shaping and molding of this statement. And I look forward to their contributions to implementing this statement and this policy statement and its estimates for our national progress. Ba hlomphehi ba ka ruri ke a leboha kgotso pula nala.
Ditho tsa Khabane ke kopa hore ke nke monyetla ona on behalf of Tafole, Setulo, Tafole, le lona ditho tsa Khabane matlo a mabedi hore re lebohe letona la ditjhelete ka mosebetsi o matla o motle o wa o entseng kajeno. Mme re a tseba hore ha o etsa le mong o entse le basebetsi mmoho le yena lekaleng le basebetsi mmoho bahlanka ba mmuso makaleng a mangata jwale ka ha sa boletse mme re a mo leboha ka nnete o sebeditse hantle. Mme ha ke tjho jwale ke kopa hore ke boele ke lebohe le lona ditho tse Khabane ka mamello ya lona e kgethehileng hore a le tshetlehele mosebetsi ona wa o entseng wa setjhaba, mme le mo file tsebe le mo mameletse ho fihlela ha jwale. Ke boele ke lebohe le Basotho hohle mo ba teng ba bileng le mamello ya hore ba dule di-radiong tsa bona, ba dule di-televisioneng tsa bona ho mamela budget speech. Ke mosebetsi wa rona bohle ho bona rona ha ena e tswela pele. Ke mosebetsi wa rona bohle jwale ha sa re tshetlehetse this policy statement hore re ke re etse re hlahlobe hantle re tentshe tsheya mme re thusa hore yo sebetsa setjhabeng e tswele Basotho molemo. Ditho tse Khabane by so saying ke kopa hore this policy statement e fetele to the relevant portfolio committee. I thank you.
So the statement shall stand referred to the relevant portfolio committees according to the standing orders. Ditho tse Khabane ntho eo nka e bolelang ke hore ka mona ka lekgotleng ntlo e tla kena hosane motshehare wa mantsiboya a hora ya bobedi fetile ka metsotso e 30 ke a le hopotsa. Otherwise, we have come to the end of today's business. This joint sitting is adjourned sine die.